Time now where you get an opportunity to ask questions. So if I could, from our experts, if I could call back all the speakers, Sam, Ben, Andrew, Udhara, and also like to welcome Bryn Williams, the Future Network Strategy Manager from SA Power Networks. Who has the first question? Up this corner. Thanks, Peter.
Hello, Stace Samzidis from Schneider Electric. This is aimed at Ben McGarry from Aurecon. Just a technical clarification. On the battery capacity, we're talking about the usable capacity or the total battery capacity in a watt C rate. And secondly, when you showed the wiring diagrams, you had no backup functionality shown. You had the inverter going straight into the main switchboard. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, so backup functionality isn't a requirement under the scheme, to the second point. To the first point on the C rating, that'll be in the full set of requirements published hopefully next week.
Hi everyone, I'm Dean from Reposit. Thank you for this event, it's very good. For Ben, Bryn and Sam, there's a bunch of pretty ambitious and quite technically involved conditions on the VPP provision, particularly on the dynamic FIM, the dynamic feed-in management stuff. How are you guys going to accredit a VPP provider's systems as being capable of these things?
Bryn, do you want to maybe have a go at that one?
So I might let Ben and others talk about the actual accreditation process, but the intention is clearly that the batteries are VPP capable. So these are, I think as Ben referred to it earlier, as future-proofing. So the requirements are around capabilities that the batteries will have, not that they will be part of a VPP at the point of installation. That's not a requirement.
So just to follow up on that, people may state that their stuff can do certain things. How are you going to check?
So I'll pass back to Ben.
So in terms of the application process for eligibility, all we can ask for is a description of how you plan to do that, and it'll be up to ourselves working with our stakeholders on behalf of the SA government to assess the validity of those claims.
Thank you.
Hello, Ben from Living Energy. My question relates to probably everyone. For the VPP capability, is a condition of receiving the money under the grant, does that force a consumer at some point in the future to have to be involved in a VPP, is my first question. And the second one is, as far as product eligibility, there's going to be 100 or 200 or 300 companies that are going to be retailers participating in the scheme, I would hope, with a dozen or so permutations of products. Is there going to be a product register that once a Living Energy or another company has applied for a set of combination of products, that's going to be listed as approved and eligible so that we don't all have to repeat that process, or is it going to be individual per retailer?
So just to cover the first one quickly, there's no requirement for people with these products to join a VPP or a VPP product. What we want to make sure is they've got the equipment available to be able to do that, should they choose to, or should there be, things evolve from a market or distribution perspective in the years ahead, they have equipment that will enable them to participate in that. So it's not about a VPP product up front. And then secondly, the current process, and Ben can fill it out, is that we are requiring everyone to put through their application process. We're not setting up a register. Obviously, through the course of the process, we're happy to look at seeing how things are working, but we think it's very important that people do the work to put forward the system they're looking to install, and we can then verify it on that basis.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add on Sam's answer. The point is not just that the system works, but that the system provider is capable of installing and configuring the system in a way that's VPP capable.
Sam can correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the things we talked about early was through the process of approving eligible systems providers, and I'm thinking about only my interest in that product register, that could be a different spin. Does that make sense? So you could have an installer that's a system provider with those certain products. We'd link those products. You could have another system provider with a mixture or a suite of different products. Those products would be rated from our system as well. Agreed? Yep.
Nigel Griffin from Griffin Renewable. Following on from Schneider's question, most consumers have modems requiring power, so with no backup required, how are we achieving our internet connection?
Can you ask that question again?
With no backup required, as you mentioned to Schneider, with all consumers having modems requiring power, with no backup, how do we maintain our internet connection?
The requirements don't apply in the event of an outage or a blackout.
Okay then.
So the requirements are required to be met when there's grid power available.
Yep. Okay then.
Good morning, Dan Daroga from SA Regional Solar at Port Pirie. My question's for Mr. Andrew Jones. I'll give you a bit of action. You mentioned the application process for finance and subsidies is all sort of online on your portal. Will the clients and consumers be having a specific login? Because maybe not everyone's going to be as computer savvy to be able to, or can we assist them as retailers?
You can assist. So as the vendor, you'll be making the contract with the consumer. You fall within, in consumer credit world, an exemption called the point of sale exemption, which actually means you can help your client through an application if you've got an iPad there or something like that. So there's that ability for you to assist. If the customer has no internet connection or no capability of using a computer, then they can ring us up. So there'll be a hotline. We can take applications over the line for that sort of a scenario.
Good morning, Matthew from Sustainable Savings. This one's probably for Bryn. What work's been done by SA Power Networks to be ready for the probably huge influx of battery seg applications and the speed of processing those?
Yeah, so we have been doing a lot of work internally on ways that we can streamline that process. Obviously, every battery installed under the scheme has to conform to the SA Power Networks connection guidelines. One of the things that can hold up the application process, particularly for batteries at the moment, is if there are non-standard configurations being installed, because they have to be assessed individually. Obviously, with this scheme, if we have systems that are well-known, so we have a set of well-known configurations, then we can essentially put in place means to batch process those, so we think we can speed that along.
Shane Yenish from Tindo Solar. My question for Bryn. We currently have countless cases of solar installs that we can't connect to the grid because of over-voltage issues. For the funds to be released, obviously the fund that needs to be operational. What is SAPN doing to minimise these times? Because at the moment we've been told in some cases up to 2 to 3 months to get a client online. Yeah, so I think it's a bit like the previous answer. I think there will always be cases where we need to do specific... there'll be exceptions where we need to do specific investigations. In general, adding battery storage does have the potential to help with over-voltage issues that can be caused by solar pushing up voltage in the middle of the day. And modern inverters also that comply with our current connection rules also will help to an extent in self-managing those voltage issues. But there will always be exceptional cases where we may have those kind of issues that will have to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis.
Hi, Jenny Paradiso from Suntrix. In regards to the compliance of specific systems, you gave an example of a client who already has a Suntrax inverter on there, so we would go and put in a specific system to meet their needs. Can you advise what kind of lead time you'd be expecting, or if there's any SLAs in regards to how long it would take to get approval for that system?
From the review perspective, it shouldn't be any different from any other application for a system.
So the lead time for that would be?
To be disclosed. the resourcing required for these reviews is a little bit uncertain at the moment, but we'll be able to give some guidance on that pretty soon.
Okay, great, because I see it as two separate things. So we would know what products we would sell in general and we would submit those straight away as soon as we were able to. But it's that case by case when you're going to see someone who already has an existing system, we just want to make sure that it's not going to take 7 days to be able to get that particular system approved because, as you understand, it's time sensitive for the client as well. Thanks.
I think the review of the system is probably going to be more time consuming than some of the other review elements for that subsidy. So we recognise that retrofit is probably the most challenging scenario, and it will require customers and providers to kind of get themselves aligned on what that time frame looks like to meet those requirements. We'll be providing guidance on what that time frame is as soon as we have a better feel for it.
Great, thanks.
I should add, on that point, I made a bit of a flippant example of an 8-year-old inverter that you're looking to use as part of your system. We will be imposing requirements on the age of that installed equipment to avoid a situation where you get a subsidy, you install a whole bunch of new kit and the existing inverter falls over the next day.
Matthew Dewhurst from Zen Energy. There was a statement a bit earlier about the requirement for CEC approved solar retailer or a commitment to the CEC code of conduct. Can you just explain that a little bit further, how someone would go, how a retailer would go about showing that they're committed to the code? And my understanding also is that being an approved solar retailer is by definition signing on to the code. So by committing to the code, is there also an expected time frame to become a solar retailer?
The first point of call is to put your application in to be a retailer. So the code, signing up to the code will be actually really simple. In the application form, the code will be there for download, and people who agree to comply with it will just basically tick a box saying, yes, I agree. So you read the code, you're happy with it, you tick a box. That's it, in a sense. But the other requirement is that you actually also have your application in. So that application could take 6, 8 weeks, whatever the time frame is. If at the end of that process you're unsuccessful in that application, then we would need to take a look at why. If there's a good reason for the fact that the application wasn't successful, then maybe that's fine. Maybe the accreditation stands. If the application fell over for a reason that we think actually calls into question whether or not the company should be part of the scheme, then we may have to withdraw the accreditation. So the idea is sign up to the code by ticking a box, read it first, sign up to it by ticking a box, put your application in, and it kind of gets you going straight away.
Hello, it's David Hetherington from Solarcare. I noticed on one of the slides it mentioned it's 40,000 homes, but it said something about commercial on a case-by-case basis. Can you maybe just elaborate on that as well, please?
Yeah, no, the intention is for residential homes, so the scheme isn't for commercial properties. I think that was in Andrew's slide, we sort of highlighted that, so if there's any confusion, it is about residential home battery supply. Yeah.
Yeah, so what my point was, it always has to go on a residential home, but it could be that the owner of that home is a business. So it can be a commercial business that's actually being sold the equipment, but it has to go on a home of a residence. So if the home is in a company name or a trust, or that doesn't exclude it from the program, it's just got to go on a residential home, not on a business, but on a residential home. So there is a register. It has to, and I've forgotten where the register is. There's something that allows us to identify whether or not a home is predominantly a residence. So if someone's running a home photography business out of their home, then that's probably fine. But if it's predominantly a corner store and someone's just sort of sleeps there occasionally, that's not a residence. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, Trent from Solar by Design. My question is to Andrew. Just regarding once the system's installed, obviously we can't always turn them on because there's no smart meter or anything like that. The finance option and the grant, will that be paid on completion of the job or when we can actually energise and leave it on?
So this is actually up to your customer. So they need to sign off that they're happy with the system. So if you can establish to them that even though it's not turned on, that they're satisfied and they give it the tick, then that's sufficient. So that it's really up to them. So if they're not willing to actually effectively pay for the equipment because they can't see any evidence that it's working, then you're sort of stuck until they do.
Ashley Gogan from New Gen Power and Storage on the York Peninsula. Just a question, probably directed at CEC. Sonnen trained quite a few integrators throughout the last couple of years to install their systems. There's probably, it could be 30% of them are not connected to the Clean Energy Council in any way, or nor do they wish to. Under the guidelines for an installer, apparently so that we do need to be connected. Can you give us some clarification on that?
So generally, to install according to the CEC guidelines, you have to be accredited. But currently, until end of this year, you don't have to have the grid-connected battery storage endorsement to install battery systems. You can do it with just grid connect and SPS endorsements. But from I think 1st April, everyone has to have that endorsement if they want to install grid-connected battery storage systems.
So essentially, we don't need to be having to pay for a CEC accreditation every year to do that facet of the job.
Not well. You still have to be grid connected, like a CEC accredited.
If we've done
install.
those courses, those particular people have done those courses, and maybe more.
They still have to be an accredited installer.
So if the provider was an accredited installer and they were working for them in that response,
they still wouldn't be able to sign off on a job without being an accredited installer.
Right. Okay. Yep. Cheers.
Yeah, no worries.
Hello, Simon from Solar Energy. This is a question to Andrew. Just in regards to the finance, if a customer wants to access that finance but then decides not to participate in the battery side of it, is it available to them just for solar?
So there is finance available to them, but it's not at that concessional rate. It's still at a good rate. It's at the moment 6.9%, so it's still a good rate. So there's still finance. So you've not lost that approval. It's just that we'd have to switch it over to the other rate.
Okay, thank you.
Question for Andrew Scott from Solar Depot. In your discussion, you talked about the quotes had to be lodged into the system from the client. Is that every quote that we get or give to a customer? Because some may not go ahead, clearly, and that's the risk.
If they need to have that quote in the system to be able to apply for the subsidy. Yep. So you can do 20 quotes and not lodge any of them, and that's fine. If they choose to go ahead with one of them, then you'll need to get that in the system.
So it's only the one they commit to you want to upload it?
Well, I think what will happen is a lot of installers, it's going to be not a huge requirement. There's not a lot of data. It's not that difficult. So I would encourage people to put every quote in because it's simple. But to be honest, it's only the one that actually ends up proceeding that you really need to put into the system. But I'd say it's going to be so simple, people will just do it. It will also allow the customers at some point to go back and look and see all the quotes that they've received and pick one. So it's a good tool for the customer as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Stephen Zilm. I'm a professional electrical contractor, have been since 1986. Just interested, typically Ben, the state's chosen to subsidise energy storage, and a lot of guys are going off talking about lithium. There's no Australian standard for lithium, mate. 3159 doesn't exist. Are we sure we're doing the right thing here?
So draft 5139, as you know, was met with some pretty controversial feedback, and the CEC, I might let speak to this a bit more, but in the absence of agreement on the right standards, that best practice guide is the best kind of collation of the relevant bits of other standards. And that's been, well, I won't speak to how that's been developed because I haven't been responsible for it, but that's the best we have in the absence of an agreed set of standards.
Okay, so our state and the CEC are comfortable with where this is going with no Australian standard?
Well, actually, IEC 62619 was directly adopted as an Australian standard end of last year. And so that is actually an Australian standard, IEC 62619 2017. That is a lithium secondary cell storage safety standard.
But there's no Australian standard or IEC standard for BMS, for lithium management systems.
Well, it's a cell safety standard and secondary standard. So it incorporates a bit of the BMS, but not the whole BMS, but it is what's available, and so that's what is available, and that's how we have to work around it.
Okay, so I noticed that you guys also said that there's going to be an inspection regime or a random, I'm not sure what the wording was, inspection regime. Who's going to conduct this inspection? What authority have they got to enter a client's property? There's a number of questions there with regards to the inspection.
So we're working to design that at the moment to make sure that we've got the right people doing that are qualified to be able to do it. They've got the right access arrangements in place through the program. So we'll provide that information through the process to people to understand that more clearly. The point was to make clear that there will be a process today.
And we're also, so just on VPP and the requirement for no backup, generally, as you know, and I deal with a lot of clients, if we did the psychiatrist test on the couch, if I said the word battery, the majority of people reply backup. That is what they are expecting from a battery. Most people expect a battery. I also noticed on there that you had a warranty that said 7 years for a battery. As far as I'm aware, no battery manufacturer are warranting batteries on life, as in date life. It's all about cycles.
Yeah, so to your first point, like I accept that a lot of people hear backup, but as you know, that's not what most systems actually do in their base form. And for a VPP enablement, we didn't see backup as critical a requirement as the ability to participate in a VPP when the grid's up. So we wanted to make the bar no higher than it needed to be for VPP capability. On the question about the warranty, we recognise that firstly 7 years is probably lower than most products are able to achieve in a daily cycling application. When you see the detail of how that warranty is specified, it will be daily cycling, and it's up to the system provider to make the case as to how the number of cycles, depth of discharge, C rating all interact to achieve the warranty requirement and the usable capacity that the subsidy is based on.
And probably someone like Dean from Reposit can answer my next question probably better than you guys, but you haven't clearly identified
onto the panel.
You haven't clearly identified what a VPP is, and you've said it needs to be enabled. But from where I sit, as someone with a battery system in their own house, if a emo sent me a text message or an email saying tomorrow between 4 p.m. and 7:30. The grid will be in shortfall. How much of your battery do you want to make dispatchable? Well, I can tell you the answer is none. Because you've just told me the grid's at risk. I've got backup on my system. Why am I going to give you anything for VPP?
So look, I think the point that you're making broadly is that there's a lot of change in this environment, and so there isn't yet a defined pathway where what you're talking about is going to happen. There may not be, but there may be. So what we're trying to do is equip people with the equipment that is enabling them to participate in wherever that future takes us as much as possible. So we're looking to try and, as best we can, it's not a perfect science, but try to look at a future-proofing pathway so that when people are investing in this equipment with the support of the government subsidy, that they are able to have equipment that can adapt as we move forward, whichever direction that may take, because it isn't clear yet exactly how that will work. And so...
Isn't the cart in front of the horse?
Well, no, we're looking to do home battery. The only thing I'd say is there is some other hands up, so we just need to share around.
All right, okay.
You have had a few.
Thank you. We've got time for a couple more questions.
Thank you.
And then we need to see if there's anyone on the phone that would like to ask a couple. So we've got one more here and one more up here.
Thanks very much. My name is Steve Kostoff. I'm from the Solar Training Centre here in Adelaide. If I can direct the question generally to Sam and to Udhara. And so the preface to the question is it's about managing risk. So I'm one of the guys that lived through the previous FedGov Green Loans program and the insulation program, where we saw many, many people enter the schemes and they were accredited by various training companies in a very, very quick manner. They exited those training companies with appropriate accreditations. And I declare my interest as being the only South Australian private RTO in this scheme. How will you ensure that the guys and the participants who are coming out of any RTOs with what appears to be the accreditations actually have done the work and learned the work before going to the CEC? Because if you take the certificates of the 4001 and 5001 on face value, what you'll find, and what we've found already, is that something like 30 people in the last 2 weeks since the scheme was announced to the public have called my office asking if we can do the 5-day course in 2 days or less.
So I think being part of government, we actually also have an arm of government that works closely with the training sector. So we'll make sure we're engaging them as well to make sure that that process is supported, and then to the extent that we need to work to try and enhance training but also provide opportunities for training in this space, we will. So it's about working together across government around that as well, because there's a range of regulation around training that is effectively administered by the state government as well. So it's about tying those together and making sure that we're alert to that concern. In terms of the specifics of the programs, I'll just get Udhara to talk.
So it's just not simply completing the studies at an RTO, but then they have to submit a case study that will be assessed by the CEC for each installer who wants to get the endorsement. And there's also an online quiz that they need to complete, which kind of demonstrates that they have acquired the skills that's required to go out into the industry and be reputable installers.
Thank you. You know that. There's something missing in between. But we'll address that later, Udhara.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Matthew from Sustainable Savings. This one's for Andrew. I just wanted to confirm the quotes and everything that's going to be uploaded to this portal, are they all commercial in confidence, or are they going to be published at some stage?
They will never be publicly published. They will be shared with the government.
Okay. And then with the fee, you mentioned the $50 fee if they don't go ahead with finance. When is that charged, at what stage, and is that to us or to the customer?
So it's only charged once the subsidy is paid effectively. So you don't pay just for an application. It's not $50 for every application. So when the subsidy is paid and the system is installed and you've been paid for the system, it's payable by you at that point. Does that make sense?
Just one more in the middle here, I think, has been waiting. Yeah, so.
Yeah, so if a system's installed and someone has taken out finance and then they go and sell their house the next month, the loan will go with the person and not stay with the house. So what people have a choice. They can take the loan and continue to repay it off over the 7 years, that's fine. Or, as I suspect a lot of people will do, is when they sell their house, they'll pay out the finance on the panels. In terms of selling the battery, we're at the moment considering a restriction around a time frame for a battery to be sold, acknowledging that there could be some new build homes where a builder is actually doing the install and the builder then sells the house, so we have to allow for that. But we're thinking about a time frame restriction, so you can't install a battery today and sell it tomorrow.
We might just see if there's anyone on the phone that would like to ask a question. Have we got anyone, or are we on hold? No? Well, we'll take...
Hi, I'm Jamie Allen from LG. Just two quick questions here. So talk about the rebates on how many kilowatt hours. Is that on
of the battery. Have you heard that?
It's usable.
It's on usable energy? Okay,
Usable.
great. And it's, we didn't really discuss...
The subsidy is the word that
Okay,
SA Gov will ask me to correct you. Yeah.
No problems on the subsidy. Yeah, sorry. The question was there is the subsidy on the usable energy or the nominal energy of the battery? And the other question was, we kind of skimmed over this, their priority list. So originally there was a 9-week priority to local manufacturers, etc. Can you provide more details on what that actually means?
Sure. So that links with Ian's presentation. So people that meet the requirement for assembly or manufacture in South Australia, there will be a window from when the portal first, the platform opens up, of 9 weeks where only those products will be available for customers to purchase through providers that are providing those products. After that period, it will be open to everyone. We think it's an advantage for people. So obviously there's an advantage around being involved and meeting those requirements in that period. But we do think, to the broader point around Ian's presentation, people will look to choose. There's a lot of promotion being done in South Australia around I Choose SA, etc. So people will look to make a choice around products that are have more either installation, supply, assembly or manufacture in South Australia broadly. So we think everyone should get themselves on the register. But after that 9-week period, it will be open to all products that meet the requirements and all providers that are qualified.
Okay. Is there potential there that all these subsidies are going to get snatched up in this 9-week period? Is there potential of that happening?
I think it's unlikely that we would see that sort of take up in that sort of period of time. Now, obviously, we've got a range of levers around the rollout of the subsidy rates, etc. And if we were sort of seeing that sort of take up at this rate, we'd have to move very quickly to look at the subsidy levels and other range of other things to ensure we meet our 40,000 target. So, in some respects, an uptake of that would be a nice problem to have, but I think it's something we'll very actively manage if we were to see this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing? Just the point I was trying to make before is the priority period of that 9 weeks is definitely that sort of emphasis, but businesses that are going to register on that product register will be there going forward. So if consumers want to find a local supplier, a local distributor, a local battery manufacturer, it'll stay there. It won't drop off after that 9-week period.
Thank you.
One last question. Thank you.
I've got 2 quick ones, hopefully. First one was about that local question, just to finish up. Is there, obviously asking for myself, for Tindo, is there any part of the finance requirement on the local content that would affect us on the solar? But secondly, there's been a bit of press on the weekend, on Sunday, about not being able to advertise that we're going to be part of the scheme or drumming up interest on the scheme until we're registered and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, we've now got however many weeks until this rolls out, where we've got customers asking questions, what do we do, all that sort of stuff. What are we allowed to say? What are we not allowed to say? Can we take some kind of expression of interest, refundable deposit? What are our limitations?
So we are looking to have the application process out for people next week. So that will enable it to move fairly quickly through the accreditation process. And I mean, the risk and what the government was really keen on highlighting was that we've got a qualification process and nobody at this stage is qualified to offer products to consumers. And so it's a highly risky situation to have people who perhaps are not fully informed but excited about the concept, being exposed to people and quite frankly, often people that aren't connected to South Australia, who are running campaigns through social media and other things as well, rather disingenuously trying to get people on the hook on a false premise. So that's obviously what we're trying to stop. Once people, the best thing is for people to get into the qualification process quickly, and then you are genuinely able to say we are a accredited provider and this is what we're looking to offer, and you can move that. So once that's happening, there is obviously no problem with people talking to people about what they're looking to offer. And the other thing that we are keen on is that there's realistic time frame expectations set as well for people, so that if and that's another thing we're looking to incorporate as best we can through the process is a delivery timeframe element, so people have an understanding of that when the product is people are going through the process of acquiring a product. So I guess, ultimately that risk sits with providers. There isn't a defined set of words, but we, the government's made it clear that it's not comfortable with people claiming to be providers without having that qualification in place. That doesn't mean that you won't have a list of people you deal with regularly or might already be dealing with who want to understand it. We understand that. But it's about getting that language right and being clear about which stage of the process people are up to. We are endeavouring to move very quickly on this. We want the accreditation process open. We're looking and have a very clear target from the government to have the platform up for that initial period starting in October. So that's what we're looking to do. So that's only a matter of weeks away. And then obviously the 9 weeks will kick through and then everything will be in from there. But yeah.
Thank you for the questions. We've had some really great questions today, and hopefully you've been happy with the answers. And I'm sure there's plenty more opportunity over coming weeks to ask further questions. Can we just thank the panel for their time today? Now, I guess just to round things out for the day, there's just a couple of things you should think of, the next steps as a system provider. Check the Home Battery Scheme website for today's presentation and also the eligible equipment criteria. We'll get that up there by the end of the day, so you can have that information in front of you and you can go away and study that. Register on the SA product register if that's the way you're going. We will have Denise and Ian and here after if you want to come up and talk to them. So, and is there anyone else? Is Tim in the audience? No. So yeah, see Denise and Ian after. Understand and gain the relevant CEC accreditations, and also, as I said, have a look at the eligible equipment criteria when it's up on the website. Talk with the OEMs. We will email you, so everyone that has registered on the website that is interested in becoming a system provider, we will email you as soon as the eligible equipment application and the system provider application process is open. So as Sam said before, we expect that to be next week. Did you have anything you want to add to that, Sam? Yeah. So once again, thank you all for coming today, and also thank you to everyone that has helped and contributed, because to put this together it takes a lot of people to chip in. So thank you very much.